I found that email chain at 11:47 on a Tuesday night, still in my scrubs, still smelling like antiseptic and 12 hours of other people's emergencies. I was sitting on the floor of my kitchen eating cold rice straight from the container, when my phone lit up with a notification from the building's tenant portal. A maintenance request had been filed on my unit, except it wasn't my unit. It was the apartment I had co-signed for my younger brother and his girlfriend 8 months ago. And the maintenance request wasn't about a leaky faucet or a broken heater. It was a formal complaint. About me. Saying I had entered the unit without permission and stolen jewelry valued at over $2,000. I read it 3 times. Then I set down my rice, very carefully, and read it a 4th time. My name was on that complaint. My name. The person who had driven 40 minutes in a snowstorm to help them move in. The person who had put her own credit on the line so they could get approved for a unit in a building they had absolutely no business applying to on their combined income. I sat there on my kitchen floor for a long moment, and then my phone buzzed again. A text from my brother. It said, "We think it's better if you give us some space for now. Please don't contact us until we reach out first." I stared at that message until the screen went dark, and then I thought about the jewelry, because I knew exactly which pieces Vanessa was talking about, and I knew something she had apparently forgotten entirely. I'm a registered nurse. I've been working in emergency care in Toronto for almost 9 years. I won't pretend that's a glamorous life. I work 12-hour shifts. I wear the same 2 pairs of running shoes until the soles separate, and my idea of a treat is getting to eat my lunch sitting down. I'm 31 years old, and I share a 1-bedroom apartment in Scarborough with a rescue cat named Douglas, who has anxiety and a vendetta against throw pillows. I am not wealthy. I am not even close to wealthy, but I am careful with money in the way that people become careful when they grow up watching a single parent stretch every dollar until it tears. My mom raised my brother and me on her own after our dad left when I was 9, and my brother Danny was 5. She worked nights at a distribution warehouse and took weekend shifts at a pharmacy. She never complained. She made us lunches, came to our school concerts exhausted, and told us constantly that we had each other and that was everything. When she was diagnosed with MS 6 years ago, I was already working, already close enough to help. Danny was 20, finishing a business administration diploma, and struggling in that unfocused way that some people struggle at 20, not lazy exactly, just not yet serious. Mom didn't make a dramatic dying speech. She's actually still alive, living in a care facility in Mississauga that takes most of her disability income. But about 3 years ago, during a bad stretch where we weren't sure how things would go, she took my hand and said, "Watch out for your brother. He has a good heart, he just needs someone in his corner." I took that seriously. Maybe too seriously, as it turns out. Danny met Vanessa about 2 years ago. She was introduced to me at a birthday dinner for a mutual friend, and my first impression was that she was very beautiful and very certain of it. She had that quality some people have where they seem to be performing being themselves, laughing slightly too loudly, touching Danny's arm for an audience. I told myself I was being uncharitable. I told myself she was probably just nervous. She was not nervous. Over the following months, she and Danny became serious fast. She moved into his bachelor apartment in Etobicoke within 4 months of them dating. Danny seemed happy, which was something I genuinely wanted for him, so I kept my reservations to myself and showed up when they invited me to things and bought her a birthday gift and tried. The co-signing situation came up about 8 months before all of this. Danny called me excited they had found a 2-bedroom in a newer building in Mississauga, close to where his job was, great amenities, in-unit laundry. The rent was $2,650 a month. Between the two of them, their combined verifiable income barely cleared the threshold the landlord required. Danny had just started a new sales job, and his income was partly commission-based, which made lenders and landlords nervous. Vanessa was doing something she described as content creation and brand consulting, which as far as I could tell meant she had about 8,000 Instagram followers and occasionally received free protein powder in exchange for posts. They needed a co-signer with stable income and a clean credit history. Danny asked me over the phone, speaking quickly, already moving past the ask toward the details of the apartment like the decision was already made. I asked him to slow down. I asked what the lease terms were, what would happen if they missed rent, whether they had a plan for the deposit. He said the first and last month's deposit was $5,300, which they had saved, and that of course they would never miss rent. This was just a formality. Landlords just wanted to see a cosigner on paper. I told him I would think about it. I called him back 2 days later and said yes, because Mom had said he needed someone in his corner, because he was my brother, because I believed him when he said it was just a formality. I signed the lease agreement. My name went on that document alongside both of theirs, which meant if they stopped paying rent, the landlord could come after me. My credit, my wages, my financial future. I understood that risk. I signed anyway. The first several months were fine, or seemed fine. Danny would text occasionally. Vanessa would post pictures of the apartment on Instagram with captions about her sanctuary and intentional living. I visited twice. The second time, I noticed she had bought a large decorative mirror, a custom neon sign, and what appeared to be a professional ring light setup. I asked Danny how things were going financially. He said great. Vanessa's brand work was picking up. Things started to shift around month 4. Danny called asking if I could lend him $800 to cover a shortfall that month. His commission check had been delayed and rent was due in 3 days. He said he would pay me back within 2 weeks. I transferred the money. He paid me back in 6 weeks. I didn't make a big deal of it. Month 6, he asked for $1,200. Same reason, commission timing, temporary thing. I transferred it. He paid back $600 and went quiet about the rest. Month 7, Vanessa sent me a voice message. This was new. She had never reached out to me directly before. Her voice was warm and friendly in a way that immediately made me careful. She said she had been thinking about how Danny's income uncertainty was causing stress for everyone, and she had this idea, if I could help them cover 3 months of rent up front, Danny could negotiate a raise because he wouldn't feel pressured by the month-to-month stress, and then everyone would be in a better position. She threw in a mention of how much Danny talked about me, how much he valued having me in his corner. In his corner. The exact phrase Mom had used. I told her I would think about it, and I did not call her back. 2 weeks after that voice message, I was visiting to drop off some things for Danny, an old winter coat of mine he had asked to borrow, some containers of food I had batch cooked. I let myself in with the spare key they had given me when they moved in. They knew I was coming. I had texted Danny 20 minutes before. Vanessa was in the living room. She looked up when I came in, and her expression did something complicated, shifted from surprise to the warm performance version in about half a second. She said Danny had stepped out to get coffee. He'd be right back. I set down the bags. She started talking, casually at first, about the apartment, about how they were thinking of getting a storage locker, about how the building's gym equipment was terrible. And then, still in that casual tone, she said, "You know, it would really help if you could talk to Danny about getting your name off the lease when renewal comes up. We want to qualify on our own, be more independent. But for that to work, Danny really needs to focus on his earning potential, not be distracted. It would mean a lot if you supported that." I looked at her for a moment. Then I said, "I'm happy to discuss lease renewal when the time comes." She smiled. The performance smile, she said. "Also, I've been meaning to ask, those earrings I saw you wearing at Danny's birthday dinner last year? The gold ones? Where did you get those? They looked like a pair I had in a box from my mom that I can't seem to find." I felt something go still inside me. I said, "Those are mine. I bought them about 2 years ago from a jewellery boutique in Kensington Market." She laughed lightly and said she must be mixing them up. Danny came back. We had an awkward half-hour of coffee and I left. I want to be precise about what happened next, because the timeline matters. The following week I found the receipt for those earrings while cleaning out an old email folder. I had purchased them online from a small jeweler, hand-hammered gold hoops, $340, and I had the order confirmation, the shipping notification, the delivery confirmation, all in my inbox from February 2 years ago. Without really thinking about why, I forwarded that email chain to myself and saved it to a folder. 3 weeks after that was when I came home in my scrubs, sat down on my kitchen floor, found the tenant portal complaint, and got Danny's text telling me to give them space. The complaint named me specifically. It described the jewelry as 2 gold hoop earrings and a gold chain necklace, total estimated value $2,100, and alleged I had entered the unit without consent and taken them. The complaint had been filed by Vanessa. There was a note that the building's property manager had been notified and that the matter might be escalated to police. I read that last line. I thought about my nursing registration. I thought about my employer. I thought about what a police call to my workplace would do. And then I stopped panicking and started thinking. I did not call Danny. I did not call Vanessa. I opened my laptop and I pulled up every document connected to that lease. In Ontario, the Residential Tenancies Act is very specific about a few things. One of them is subletting and unauthorized occupancy. When Danny and Vanessa had applied for the unit, the lease listed 2 occupants, Danny and Vanessa. What Vanessa's younger sister had been doing living there for the past 6 weeks, using the parking spot, receiving packages, being visible on the building's entrance camera footage, was not reflected anywhere in that lease. The property manager had mentioned the camera footage in passing when I had bumped into him in the lobby 2 months ago, commenting that the building had upgraded their system. I had thought nothing of it at the time. I also pulled up my original co-signer agreement. One of the clauses I had read carefully before signing, because I am someone who reads things carefully, before signing stated that the co-signer had the right to be notified of any material changes to the tenancy agreement, including changes in occupants. I had never been notified. I am not a lawyer. I want to be clear about that. But I have a close friend named Priya who is a paralegal, and I texted her that night and asked if she could talk. She called me back in 20 minutes. I explained everything. She asked me to send her the documents. She called back the next morning and walked me through my options. There were two things I could do, and I could do them simultaneously. The first was to formally dispute the theft complaint through the tenant portal and with the building's property management company. I had documentary proof time-stamped purchase records that the earrings were mine, purchased before Vanessa and I had ever met. Priya helped me draft a formal written response that I submitted to the property management office, along with my receipts, my email order confirmation, and a note that I would be consulting with the landlord and tenant board regarding the conduct of the complainant. The second was to file a notice with the landlord and tenant board, specifically an inquiry about the unauthorized occupancy of a third person in the unit, which was a breach of the lease terms I had co-signed. Because I was a co-signer, I had standing to raise this issue. Priya helped me understand exactly what that meant and what it didn't mean, and I am not going to pretend it was simple or that I wasn't scared. But I filed the inquiry, and I sent a written notice to the property management company, documenting the unauthorized occupant and formally requesting a review of the tenancy agreement. Then I withdrew my co-signer status. In Ontario, a co-signer can apply to be removed from a lease at renewal if the primary tenants no longer meet the income threshold, or if there has been a material breach of the lease agreement. Their lease was up for renewal in 6 weeks. With the unauthorized occupancy on record, the breach of agreement was documented. Priya helped me submit the formal request to be removed from the lease. I also drafted a letter to Danny, not an angry letter, a factual one. I told him what I had filed and why. I told him I had documentation proving the jewelry was mine. I told him that I had co-signed that lease in good faith, and that filing a false complaint against me was not something I was willing to absorb quietly. I told him that I loved him, and that none of this was what I had wanted. He read it. I could see the read receipt, and did not respond for 4 days. In the meantime, I went to work. I did my 12-hour shifts. I ate lunch sitting down when I got the chance. I came home to Douglas, who knocked a throw pillow off the couch, and I watched television and tried to sleep. On the 4th day, Danny called. He did not apologize, not at first. He said Vanessa had told him about the filing, and he felt like I was trying to blow up their lives. He said he couldn't believe I would do this over earrings. He said he thought I was supposed to be in his corner. I let him finish. And then I said, Danny, I filed a complaint because Vanessa accused me of theft to the building management and threatened to go to police. Not because of earrings. Because she accused me of being a criminal, and I had to protect myself. Silence. I said, your sister has been living in that unit for 6 weeks. That's a lease violation. I should have been informed. I wasn't. More silence. Then he said quietly, I didn't know she filed that complaint. She told me she just asked the building to look into it. I didn't say anything. I let him sit with that. The lease renewal review resulted in the property management company declining to renew the lease as is. Given the documented unauthorized occupancy and the formal complaint I had raised, they required a new application, meaning Danny and Vanessa would need to requalify without me as a co-signer. On their actual income, in the current rental market in the GTA, qualifying for a $2,650 a month unit was not realistic. They were given 60 days to find alternative arrangements. Their $5,300 deposit was returned to them as required under the Tenancies Act since the non-renewal was driven by the breach, but that was the money they had spent 8 months ago, not the months of rent they'd paid, and they had no new place lined up. Vanessa's sister had to leave as well, apparently, which I suspect did not go smoothly. The false complaint was formally withdrawn after the property management company reviewed my documentation. No police were ever involved. I received a long text from Danny about 3 weeks after the non-renewal notice. It was halting and not entirely coherent, the kind of message someone writes and rewrites and eventually just sends before they lose their nerve. He said he was sorry. He said he had found out that Vanessa had filed the complaint without telling him the full details of what she was alleging. He said he should not have sent me that text about space. He said he was going to be staying with a friend for a while and that things with Vanessa were complicated. I read it standing in the break room at work, still in my badge, with 20 minutes left in my shift. I texted back, "Thank you for saying that. When you're ready to talk, I'm here. Not in your corner. Just here. There's a difference, and I've learned it." A few weeks after that, my colleague Amara organized a Sunday dinner at her place in East York, her and her partner, me, Priya, another nurse from our unit named James, and his husband. Amara made jollof rice and fried plantain, and a chicken dish that I asked her to teach me 3 separate times and still cannot replicate. We sat around her table for 4 hours. We talked about everything and nothing. We laughed until James's husband nearly fell off his chair. I drove home that night with the windows cracked even though it was cold, just to feel the air. Douglas was waiting by the door, unimpressed as always. I fed him and made tea, and sat on my couch and thought about my mom's voice saying he needs someone in his corner. I think she meant it as a kindness. I think she genuinely believed that the way to protect someone you love is to never let them face consequences. I understand that instinct. I just don't think it's true anymore. My brother is an adult. He made choices. Some of those choices were shaped by someone who was not honest with him, which is genuinely sad. But some of them were just his. And the most loving thing I can do, the most real thing, is stay honest with him rather than absorb the fallout on his behalf indefinitely. He's staying with a friend. He texted me last week to ask if I wanted to get coffee. I said yes. I'm not his corner anymore. I'm just his sister. I think that's actually better. If you've read this far, you probably know this feeling. That specific exhaustion of being the dependable one, the one with the stable job, the clean credit, the emergency fund, and watching that dependability get treated as an entitlement, rather than a gift. People in your life who have learned that your love comes with no floor, no limit, no moment where you finally say this is too much. I want to be careful here because I don't think every family situation is the same. And I don't think the answer is always to walk away or to file complaints or to let leases expire. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it isn't. But I think there is something worth saying about the difference between being someone's support and being someone's liability management. I was a co-signer, not a parent. I was a sister, not a financial backstop. And when I started being treated like the second thing while being expected to show up as the first, something had to change. The earrings, by the way, are in my jewelry dish on the bathroom shelf. Gold hoops, hand-hammered, $340 from a small shop in Kensington Market. I wore them to Amara's dinner. They look exactly like themselves. They always have.